Welcome to Let the Quran Speak, Iqbal.
Thank you.
One of the topics that Muslims don't talk about very much is zakah. We talk about it once a year in Ramadan, but then afterwards, we kind of stop talking about it until, the next year. And I know, Iqbal, that one of the things that is really important to you is that Muslims rethink the way that they think about zakah. So we need to have these conversations about zakah.
Sure.
So tell me what you think is wrong with the conventional way in which Muslims think about zakah.
Sure. So I think it's fair to say that the average Muslim, when he or she gives zakat, is thinking that by giving zakat, I am fulfilling an individual obligation, that as long as I give the right amount of money to anyone, anywhere in the world who deserves that money, and specifically who is in a situation of poverty, and as long as I'm alleviating that poverty, then I have fulfilled my obligation of zakat, basically, or that the purposes of zakat have been fulfilled. And again, as with the issue of salah and actually many other things, our motivation or mindset when it comes to the actual act of giving is, yes, the relief that is provided, or that the particular cause or the issue that we know that we're tackling or supporting. But actually, increasingly, I would say, and for many people, the main thing really is not actually what is being necessarily achieved right now, but again, the anticipation of reward for the fact that I'm parting with some money. Now, none of these things individually are wrong in their own right? Because you might be thinking, well, what's wrong with that? There's nothing particularly, wrong with that. Yes, you are fulfilling an individual obligation. Yes, you are making the calculation of a certain amount, and you have to pay that amount. And by helping somebody who's in need, obviously, in isolation, just look at it on its own, there's no problem with that. But the problem is actually that these are all components or elements of zakat, but they don't account for the full picture. Okay, so the full picture of zakat, I would say like this, and I think an easy way to understand it is just to think about the phrase zakat is a pillar of Islam. In line with what we've just said, the average Muslim, when their understanding of zakat as a pillar of Islam, means that I have an individual obligation to give zakat. But zakat as a pillar of Islam means zakat upholds this phenomenon called Islam. Therefore, zakat, the purpose of zakat, is to uphold, is to further devotion to God on earth. If Islam is submission, devotion, commitment to God, then zakat, the effect of zakat should be that now, the effect, when any financial transaction happens, the effect is in the way in which is achieved through the way in which the money is spent. Again, when most Muslims think about the effect of zakat, they think about purification of wealth, purification of self. These are components, but they're not actually the main part or the critical component. The point is what is actually being achieved with these funds, and therefore how are we collectively thinking about these things? So rather than zakat being an individual obligation, it's actually a communal resource. Rather than it being just for poverty alleviation, it's actually for a whole comprehensive set of needs of the community of believers and for belief and faith itself. And so there are many different things to look at, not just poverty alleviation. And rather than it being a random individual kind of choice as to where my zakat goes, and where it's basically given by hundreds of thousands, millions of people through countless numbers of organizations, actually what it should be in principle is much more pooled, centralized, a sort of a resource that is strategically kind of overseen. So there's these three components of effective zakat to summarize. Number one is that the money is pooled or centralized. Number two, that there is a focus or a localization, and we can maybe explore that. And then the third one is that there is a balance or a comprehensive nature of spend. It's not just focused on single causes, that it's actually spread across different things. Now, on none of those three counts are we anywhere near where we need to be, and that's why, in my opinion, in fact, it doesn't even matter how much zakat we give, it will not achieve what, in my understanding, is the divine intent behind instituting zakat in the first place, which is to uphold Islam. Islam should be progressing because of the zakat that's being given.
When we think about the Prophet's time, that's how the zakah was actually instituted, right? In a collective way and the pooling of the resources that you mentioned, right? But that isn't done now because we don't have a centralized Muslim community.
Well, this is the interesting thing. So often when I've spoken about this subject, and I have a lot over the years, because I used to be the chief executive of the National Zakat Foundation, and it was a funny thing because I knew for a fact that a lot of what we were saying at the time seemed really radical or different, and so everybody's quite suspicious. Okay, but actually, it is radical, but it's radically classical. You know, that's the point about it. Like we always say, let's go back to the sunnah, let's go back to, but that's exactly what it's doing. It's actually saying, and to your point, I don't think that the absence of a prophet is an excuse. Like we can't say, well, there's no prophet now, so there's no centralized anything. But we always talk about the fact that we are a one, community of believers, and we know, and we have the ability to organize ourselves. We have the ability to have structures of leadership and hierarchy and the things that allow us to come together and work together, just as everybody else does for all different causes and communities and everything else. But our disunity and disorganization is a major reason as to why, and lack of leadership actually is a major reason as to why zakat ends up, in this very haphazard sort of state in which it's in today.
Does the Quran offer us any guidance in terms of how zakat should be given and what sort of, who it should be given to? Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Sure. So in fact, there isn't much, I wouldn't say there is much detail actually. There is a constant repetition of the importance of giving zakat. So when it comes to the actual the payment side, it's like pay it, get it down to an individual. Yes, that's the purpose of it. However, and we can maybe explore this later, there is a lot to be understood from the constant repetition of salah and zakat together and the particular ways in which those references are made, which suggest that these are absolutely fundamental and core to the whole project, if you like, or the whole mission of Islam to succeed in the first place. But in terms of the recipients, because that's an important part, yes, we have the famous verse of the 8 categories of recipients. This is in verse number 60 of chapter 9, Surah At-Tawbah. إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل. So the sadaqat. Now this is interesting. Sadaqat obviously literally means generally charitable giving. So sadaqah typically we understand it as a voluntary charity as opposed to zakat, the obligatory. But we know famously that many of the verses in the Quran as well as prophetic narrations, when sadaqah is mentioned, is often understood to mean the obligatory zakat. You could argue that actually sadaqah is the overall umbrella of giving under which you have voluntary charity and zakat as a subset. Sometimes you might refer to sadaqah as the obligatory. But the interesting thing is this. You see, the purpose of zakat and sadaqah I don't believe are any different. But this is where I think there's a lot of confusion amongst people. And the easy way to illustrate this is actually to look at the other actions that we call the pillars, right? There's no difference in purpose between obligatory prayer and voluntary prayer. There's no difference in purpose between obligatory fasting and voluntary fasting. Or even the obligatory pilgrimage and the voluntary pilgrimage. Fundamentally, the purpose is the same, right? Meaning that when we talk about the purposes or the categories of zakat, I don't think we're just talking about the categories of zakat. We're talking about what Allah is telling us are the priorities about what to do with our giving, full stop. Whether it's the obligation only, because that's just a minimum layer, but then what you go on to do beyond that. These 8 categories then are what? To deal for the poor, for the needy, for the administrators, for those whose hearts are to be won over, to win hearts, for those who are to free people from slavery or bondage, to help those in debt, in God's cause, to spend in God's cause, and to help the traveler. Okay? Now, it seems like a disparate random set of things, but actually when you look at them collectively, there's a lot of wisdom in them. And actually, one of my favorite summaries of the wisdom of these categories comes in the tafsir of Imam al-Tabari, who said, in conclusion of a long discussion about the 8 categories, that fundamentally, what is this all about? He said there's 2 things fundamentally. صَدُّ خَلَّةِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ وَمَعُونَةُ الْإِسْلَامِ وَتَقْوِيَتُهُ. It is to literally means to fill the cracks that exist for the Muslims, meaning that there's a lack, there's a poverty, there's a need, either economic or social, right, or kind of legal, if you might say, because of the slavery and in terms of being in debt, etc., as well as just poverty, etc., to fill all these gaps and cracks. So these things aren't getting in the way of people's ability to be faithful, and this is the key point. You don't give zakat to a poor person because you just feel sorry for them and they're in need. You give it, and how does it help Islam? Because you're shoring up the connection between believers and the faith of the believer. Someone who's left in poverty, their faith is going to go down, right? There's no, that's why it's no mystery that whole droves of poor Muslim communities are now no longer Muslim around the world, because bread came and a different message came, right? And all of a sudden, it's not because they had a theological discussion and thought, actually, you know what? Some other path makes sense, or another way to conceive of God makes sense. It's because in desperation, you don't have that kind of surety. So that's that part. But the other part, to help and support, to strengthen Islam. So there's the idea of the individual welfare, but collective strength and reputation To win hearts means what? To win hearts and minds. I mean, it's a phrase we even use now, fascinatingly,
Yes.
to bring hearts together, internally within the community, but also in terms of your perception. It's basically PR, essentially, right? If you think about it, every other agenda out there, the environmental agenda, those who are trying to define sexual norms, right, and how these things are, and gender norms and how these things are understood, or it could be to do with minority kind of race communities, what have you. It doesn't really matter. When they want to progress an agenda, political parties, etc., you want to progress an agenda, you're going to put money behind, like your message, your reputation, and to support your people, and to have your administrators in place as well to kind of move things forward. And so you have that. You have the idea of God's cause, which is to further, again, the mission of the deen, to defend, to preserve and promote faith. Then you all of a sudden you realize, wow, okay, you know what? There's a lot more to this than simply, I just give them to alleviate poverty just randomly anywhere, here, there, or anywhere.
So I guess Muslims should think about those categories more broadly, right? Because, sometimes people will write to us or email us and say, well, is your project Zakah eligible, right? And then it's like, okay, yeah, it fits into this category. But what you're saying is that you should think about those categories more broadly and think about what the aim of those categories are.
Yeah. I was discussing with a friend of mine and a scholar recently, and I think we, together in our conversation, we came up with something which I think is a simple way to reflect how organizationally or functionally things are the wrong way around at the moment. What happens is lots of different people tried lots of different things, and then we go back to see what kind of income we can get for those projects. Yeah. And so for organizations, it doesn't matter whether it's Let the Quran Speak, or it's any other international relief organization, or an Islamic center, whatever it is. It's like we do the thing that we find is meaningful, fine, and then we go back and we say, okay, like, where's the money for this? And then like we also think, oh, can I get zakah for this? I wish I could, kind of thing, right? And then we bring it in, and then whatever else comes in. You see, it's understandable to a certain degree that it works like this, but the problem being goes back to the original conversation. We don't have a kind of a leadership, an overarching, a coherent collective strategy for what exactly we're trying to do here, which basically says that zakah is a resource that comes in, and then we look at the interests, right? The communal kind of interests and stuff, and we say, how do we allocate and support accordingly all the different things? You see, zakah should be functioning in that way, just like a national government, a local government, or even, if you want a different kind of example, a good one is like a club, right? Like even a gym, okay? Members all pay in. They don't all have autonomy to say that this is what I want my membership fee to be spent on. And zakah is a membership fee to be a Muslim, basically, if you want to say it like that. To Club Islam, you pay the zakah is your membership fee, right? You don't pay zakat.
Wow, okay.
That's a nice way to think about it. We're all we're all members of the club. We've all got our own different interests or whatever. But there is a management. There is an administration. And that administration decides the balance of spend between security for the gym, the equipment that's going to be there, maybe providing bursaries for people who can't afford membership, right, etc. These kind of things. But the objective is what? To advance fitness in the world. Okay. Now the same idea, right? Now the leadership can be chosen, elected, whatever, by the community in whatever form. And I do think there's something about that. I think there's whoever is organizing this kind of community should have been appointed by the community. I think the problem is everyone's self-appointed right now. And this is the issue we have. And until we can get over that and actually get united in some way and reorganize ourselves, then I think that we will forever be in this kind of mode. Until that point in time, then we are going to be in a situation where people will ask, can I give my zakat? And then for us individually, the organizations will have to say, based on what they assume and understand, yes or no. The problem, though, is the fact that you have this... for me, the other issue which we haven't discussed much is then the local versus international, you see. And I would just say this, that whether it's poverty or whether it's the broader communal kind of aspects of zakat, what we really mustn't miss is this, is that when the Prophet, peace be upon him, and all of the Prophets actually, because Salah and Zakah and these things were parts of all of their missions, but when the Prophet, peace be upon him, was gathering and encouraging sadaqah amongst people, like on a voluntary, spontaneous way, and that's maybe the difference between sadaqah and zakah. Meaning sadaqah is a voluntary activity, meaning a spontaneous individual, it's not necessarily organized in that way, whereas zakah is more functionally organized, perhaps. That's one of the potential differences. But when he was doing that, it was all in the context of the broader mission, right? What we do is we take sadaqah out of the kind of the sunnah seerah, or in the Quranic narrative, and we kind of just separate it and make it into this own kind of thing, where again it becomes the end in its own right. What we miss is the fact that, no, it's a coherent part of shoring up those who are in difficulty in the community. You spend money on that. You spend money on the reputation of the community, on your external kind of issues and whatever else. Again, just like any coherent budget of a government, a community, a society, etc. and all of these things synergize. But because they are focused on the interests of this particular population, they all synergize and come together. So I say, like, if you pray here, you should be paying here. Right? If you pray here, you pay here. Then all of these things come together. And then we can't have a situation where we have Muslims in Canada, for example, which is where we are right now, where we're giving zakat all over the place, but there are people in Canada who have a problem. Now, it might be relatively a different level, but they're your responsibility. They're your local community. We are responsible for the mission of the deen of Islam in Canada, here primarily. Like, that just makes sense. You're not accountable for the Islam and poverty globally everywhere. Allah's not going to ask us about every single person on earth who had suffering or difficulty or here, there, left, right, and center. No. But He will ask us about what, individually and collectively, how do we further the deen in the environment or the spaces where we were able to have, like, most understanding, influence, etc. And I think that's very important for us to realize. We actually drain ourselves of resources in our kind of, let's call it, Muslim minority communities in Western countries, massively drain ourselves. There's no balance, by the way. I mean, in the United Kingdom, where I live, at least 95% of zakah goes abroad.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
For sure. At least 95% of zakah goes abroad. Like, it's like a zakah extremism, I'd call it. Literally. Like, it's not. Just imagine if, like, and when you say that, actually, you see, the benefit of zakat should be going to the community where the payers live, the givers live.
Yes.
You know, they should be experiencing. We all benefit. It's like the welfare budget of a country is not just for the benefit of those. It's for the benefit of the whole country. The whole national project fails if you leave a whole section of your community behind. You see. Similarly, the entire Muslim community fails if you have a whole section of your community left impoverished and in their context unable to progress. Similarly, if Islam is looked at in a negative light, if we are not promoting and pushing forward messaging that is helpful and in line with what Allah wants us to do and to move things forward, just as everybody else is pushing their agendas forward, then we're just doing a disservice, basically, to what we should be doing. So, like, balance is what's required, and for me, at least a 50-50 balance, if not more, like an 80-20 balance in favor of where we are. And when we strengthen ourselves in the communities we find ourselves in, our ability to have a much more a deeper international kind of influence will be significantly greater than it is right now.
Thank you for sharing these thoughts with us, Iqbal.
You're welcome.
There are people out there who don't interact with Muslims at all in their day-to-day lives. They learn everything they know about Muslims from TV or social media. Our Muslim Media Hub will reach these people and transform their lives. Support us at QuranSpeaks.com.